Okay. All right. You had some homework out of your book, correct? Now, before we kind of start that, let's kind of do a quick, like a little review. So I think you started on page, like, what was it, like number 9 on your homework? All right, and the same thing, people that are zooming in, you can ask me questions next week on this, but they may ask a question and can answer for you. Okay. Now, we talked about population and sample. All right. Remember, a population is all the things that you're studying with that question. And a sample is a little bit of that, like it's a little subset of that, like you pulled some out. We'll talk about how to do that today. Okay. Now, I talked about a parameter and a statistic. Now, they're both numerical measurements. They're both numbers. What's the difference between a parameter and a statistic? Do you remember?
The statistic comes from a sample, a parameter comes from population.
That's right. A statistic comes from a sample, and a parameter comes from population. So some of your homework was asking you, is this a statistic or is this a sample? Is everybody with me? And it depends on where the number's coming from, if it's coming from all or just some. Okay. Then we talked about data being either qualitative or quantitative. Which one is numbers?
Quantitative.
Quantitative. Quantities. Everybody with me? Qualitative is not numerical, but remember what I said though, it occasionally, most of the time it's words. Like your hair color, your gender, you know, your political preference, those kind of things. But it can be a number if the number is only used for what?
Identification.
Identification. You know, it may be your seat number. You see what I'm saying? Or like number 1 instead of calling your name. You know, it may be your student ID number. It might be your social security number. It might be that you play for the basketball team and your number is 21. So if it's just for identification, but not really numerical value, then sometimes that can be qualitative. Now, if it's quantitative, if it's a number, it can either be discrete or continuous. Which one has gaps in the measuring scale? Discrete. An example I gave was shoe size. I can literally write down every shoe size a person can legitimately tell me. So when you tell me your shoe size, it's got to be off this list. But I can't do that with weight because weight is continuous. Okay. So there were lots of vocabulary words thrown around. Now, what I told them at the end, which some of you told me was a little bit harder to hear, I'm going to do vocabulary on a test. So what you don't want to do is to wait till the night before the test to start showing the vocabulary. Because first of all, it'd be on a pop test. Okay, so you miss it. So your grade's already affected. But the other thing is it'll be too much of it. You won't be able to get it from short-term memory to long-term memory if you wait. So make sure that you start with those vocabulary words. Now, anybody got a question on anything on page 9 or 10? Weren't they asking you on theirs whether there was a problem with the study or something? Like a bias? Right, does anybody, what do you think? What's the problem on number 5? Like on page 9, number 5. Did you think that would be a good thing or not a good thing? Like, is there a problem with that particular study? Somebody tell me what you think the problem, what bothered you about it?
The sponsors could possibly profit.
Yeah, who paid for it? All right. So, I mean, like we talked about last time, this ends up being physicians and medics trying to figure out the use of meat and dairy. Like, is it good for you or bad for you? So that's legit, but the problem is that the dairy people are like giving like a whole bunch of money to those people. Do you see what I'm saying? So there's kind of a conflict of interest there. So who's paying for the study is a problem. Number 9, you had something about nuclear plants, didn't you? So what was the problem on number 9, do you think? Now you're supposed to do the reading before you do it. Like it says read sections. Everybody with me? So do you understand that when you read the material, it told you that a voluntary response is a problem? And here's why. When people have a voluntary response, usually you only get the extremes. Like if I sign on, say, Facebook or some kind of social media, every once in a while, like a question will pop up, like a survey. What if I really don't care? Am I going to take time to answer it? No. So those people that really answer those kind of things are people that really care. You see what I'm saying? I'm either really for it or what? Really against it. So you get to what I call kind of skewed data. Okay, it may be that most people just don't give a flip. Maybe only 5 people cared and 4 of them were mad. You know what I'm saying? It's a lot of those things like, when you go read like customer reviews, who takes time to review their stuff off Amazon? Do y'all review your stuff off, y'all get this little thing that says review. Do y'all review? Not usually. When's the only time you review usually? When you don't like it, you're mad about it. You see what I'm saying? So you get some skewed stuff when you start doing that. So don't just look at how many people got mad. Don't look at the, everybody who got mad. Well, 9 people got mad, but there are only 10 people that filled the thing out. You see what I'm saying? But you look back up there and 15,000 bought it. Now, sometimes I'll respond if it's super awesome. You see what I'm saying? But that's why you don't want. So number 9, the problems of volunteer response. All right. So they talk about some problems in there. Anybody got a question about any of those problems on that set of homework? All right, well, let me ask you this. Look at number 31. Number 31 told you that they were 1,165 people who responded to the survey, and then it said 48% said that you better get on your knee when you vote. And then A asks you, is trying to lead you to understand what's the problem with that. Could it really be that 48% of people did that? No. Why? What's your answer to A? It's a decimal. You can't have part of a person. So where did they get the 48%? What did they do? They what? They rounded it. So they should have said approximately. You see what I'm saying? So you got to be real careful with things. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. All right, back on the next set, then you have some problems. Let's see, starting on page, like 23? All right, has anybody got a question about discrete versus continuous, or got a question about, that's what you had off of that, wasn't it? Everybody good about discrete and continuous? Okay, I'm gonna take your word for it. All right, now, then let's kind of keep going with what we were talking about. All right, I want to talk a little bit out of section 1.1, and then I want to kind of finish up 1.2 and 1.3. Now, section 1.1 is the one that talks about, when you read it, it talked about you got to be careful about some things. Okay, it's kind of talking a little bit about critical thinking. Now, here's what I mean. All right, when you start doing a survey or a sample or an experiment or however you want to, when you're doing your study, there's some things you got to be real careful about. All right, one of the things is the question or the conclusion, how it's phrased. Well, let me show you what I'm talking about. If you're not from here, 220 is the loop that goes around Jackson. So if you don't have to go down through the middle of Jackson, you can like pretty much right past Clinton, get on the loop and come out and get close to Madison. Now, a few years back, there was a big billboard on the right side of the road that said Coke is #1 in Jackson. Now, that billboard wasn't even in your rearview mirror well before there was a billboard on the left side that said Pepsi's #1 in Jackson. Now somebody's lying. Or are they? What does that statement mean? Coke is #1 in Jackson. When you see it, what do you interpret it to mean? This is the interactive part. What would you think it meant when you read Coke is #1 in Jackson?
It's most popular.
Most popular. Most people drink Coke. Did they say that's what it meant? It could be the Coke plant has more employees. It could be Coke had more in sales. It could be at some superette in West Jackson on October the 3rd, 1975, they sold more Cokes than Pepsi's. It could be the plant has more employees than Pepsi has employees in their plant. So that sign didn't mean anything. You assumed it meant something. You know what happens when you assume. See, sometimes you gotta be careful about interpreting a statement because they do it on purpose. Now, let me give you another example. Now, this was a few years back when my children were smaller and we had to go to McDonald's. All right, and went in McDonald's and there was a big sign that said salads made fresh daily. So I get my chicken cashew salad or whatever it is. Do I think that that salad was made this morning? Have you had a McDonald's salad? You know what I'm saying? Like, but now you can be sued if you make a statement in writing and it's proven to not be true. McDonald's gets fined. So how can they make that statement if they didn't make my salad this morning? Did that sign say that my salad was made this morning? What did it say?
It said they make a fresh salad every day.
They didn't say they made mine. Did they say they make it at the store? Somewhere right now in Atlanta, Georgia, somebody chopping lettuce. The McDonald's Corporation makes salads every day. You see what I'm saying? So you got to be real careful when you're just reading wording of things. Now, one time I remember I was leading an exercise class. You should never go to the grocery store hungry. That's like a terrible idea. All right, terrible idea. All right, but I did. So I left and I went to Kroger and I went to the frozen food section. I don't know what I was really looking for. And y'all, this chocolate concoction was on the box. It looked so freaking good. You know what I'm saying? Like, it had whipped cream, it had chocolate inside, outside, there was some nuts sprinkled on the top. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm thinking, that looks great. All right. And I remember it said, it was a Sara Lee product, and it said Sara Lee Light. And I'm like, Jesus has heard my prayer. I was so excited, y'all. Now, I am the person who do not want to get behind in the line at Walmart or Kroger because I'll do a price check. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's my money, I'm guarding my money, and I'm a little OCD. So I noticed that next to it, there was another concoction that looked exactly the same. And it just said Sara Lee. And what's the difference? Now, I need you to understand, at this point in time, now this has been, let's put fixed in air quotes since then. There used to not be, formerly, there was no definition for the word light on food packaging. You could put the word light on it anytime you wanted to. Well, the FDA decided that was unfair to consumers, so they made a ruling that said that you could only put light on a food product if it was lighter in color, like light brown sugar instead of dark brown sugar. Is everybody with me? Or if the light version had 33% fewer calories or fewer calories than the original. You see what I'm saying? So problem fixed. Okay. So I picked the package up and here's what, because it said half the calories in the original. So I picked the chocolate Sara Lee Light cake up and flipped it around, and I picked the regular Sara Lee cake up and flipped it around. And I'm looking, because the pictures look identical. And I look, and in like 4 seconds, I just started laughing. You know what they had done? They had taken that original cake and chopped it in half. And stuck it back in the box. So sure enough, per serving, this had 50% fewer calories than what? Than the original. And my favorite part was, and they charged me more. It's like, thank you, but I have my own knife. No self-control, but still what? I got my own knife. So you've got to be careful about wording. You've also be careful about the order. Now, one of my students used this against me. She was freaking brilliant. All right, I was walking across the quad, I guess last year, and she came to me and went, Dr. Gann, do you like cookies? What did I say? Yeah, I cookies. What do I think? She gonna give me a cookie. She said, my tribe is selling. You see what I'm saying? Like, oh man, she set me up. See, if she'd have said my tribe is selling cookies, I'd have said, oh, I'm not that. I wouldn't be true, but I'd have just, you know what I'm saying? Like, but she set me up, like she totally had me, like she asked me the question, then I was like, so you gotta be careful. You gotta be careful about this. Like if I went up to you, if I could get 6 feet, you know, okay, and I said, is it okay if I raise your taxes? What are you gonna say? No. But if I go up to her and I say, is it okay if I raise your taxes to help children that will otherwise starve to death? Do you see what I'm saying? The way it's phrased, the order of it, you got to be careful about it. People don't look at numbers, they look at pictures. And you got to be careful to start throwing pictures up for you. Let me give you a silly example. I'm underpaid, which is so true. Okay. So suppose I want to make my case, and I'm going to go before the board of trustees. And I'm going to try to explain to them that in here, that women make less than men in themselves. So I go do my study and I come back and I find out that women, the average, now I have no idea what the average salary is. I'm like making these numbers up. Okay? But suppose I go make a picture, because I know they're not going to read a bunch of data and a bunch of numbers. All right? So suppose I find out that women make, let's do this. Pretty easy. All right, suppose women end up making like, I don't know, $46,000. Okay. All right, suppose the men make like 52,000 average. Everybody with me? And I go before the board and go, told you. Now, they're going to look at that and go, what? I mean, it looks like men do make a little bit more than women. So that ain't the picture I'm going to show. I will show this picture. Get your checkbook out, boys. Now, the graph, they say the same thing. If you read the scales, everybody with me? But do people read scales? They just glance at what? Pictures. This looks like they make like 5 times what I make. You see what I'm saying? And they really what? They don't. So if you see a vertical scale that doesn't start with 0, it's on purpose. Because you can chop things off and stretch them. You see what I'm saying? And it skews what's really there. So you need to start noticing the scales and things on graphs. So you've also got to be careful about, you got to be careful because people just, what if I told you right now on this campus, there were 117 international students? You didn't believe me. I had no idea. Why would you believe me if I said there were 117? Because it sounds so what? Exact. I can make up an exact number. If I said there are 100, you see what I'm saying? So just because the number is exact doesn't mean it's valid. Like you can make up an exact number as long as you make up a. So one time I was listening on the radio and it said something like this. It said something like 32% of the litter on Mississippi highways is blown out of the back of trucks. How did they possibly know that? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, how is that even possible? highways or the camera? I don't think so. But you know, 32% sounded so what? Specific. Now, I don't know, maybe they did a study, maybe some girl like stood on the side of a highway for 15 minutes one day and recorded every time she saw trash come out and it happened to, you see what I'm saying? Like, I don't even know how that happened. I'm a little scared. One day I was listening to the radio and it said this. Oh yeah, it said 1,000 out of every 300,000 Mississippians have diabetes. Now, well, first of all, there's an easier way of, and don't even know it. There's an easier way to phrase that. What's an easier way, instead of saying 1,000 out of every 3,000? What's an easier way of saying that? 1 out of 3. You're like, well, why did they say 1 out of 3? Instead of
thousands make it sound bigger.
Oh yeah. You know, if it's 1 out of 3, you ain't ever the one. But now if we got 100,000 out of 300,000 people, oh my gosh, I gotta get my blood sugar checked. You know what I'm saying? So you gotta be real careful about how things are worded. You've got to be real careful about the order of the questions. You've got to be real careful about the pictures that you're looking at. You've got to be very careful about people drawing conclusions for you or leading you to a conclusion. All right, let me show you this. The highest death rate in the country is in Florida. Even before y'all started going to the beach without any masks on. Everybody with me? So even 10 years ago, even the highest death rate's in Florida. So don't go to Florida like you won't die. Why might the highest death rate in the country be in Florida? Besides, you got people not running around with masks. It's a bigger state. It's a bigger state. What else?
People go there to retire.
I mean, not to be insensitive, but if you got a bunch of old people, so they have like that old people. You see what I'm saying? Or let me ask you this. I can statistically prove this. Men have more car accidents than women. So we're better drivers. Yeah, that may be true. Other than we probably are better drivers. Are you with me? What's another possible explanation for that?
Men drive more often.
Men drive more often. When your parents are in the car, is usually driving. Who has jobs that take them more out? You see what I'm saying? They have traveling jobs. Who's driving the 18-wheelers? Do you see what I'm saying? If men are driving more, they are absolutely naturally going to have more what? More accidents. That's why most of the accidents occur within 10 miles of your house. Because that's mostly where you what? You drive. You see what I'm saying? Like I may go to Florida once a year, but usually I'm not driving 1,000 miles away. Usually I'm staying in kind of a little perimeter thing. So they kind of talk you through. So when you're reading through this first section, make sure you're noticing some things about some possible explanations of things. Okay? All right, now, in this second section, they're talking about kind of collecting data. All right? And they talk about levels of measurement. Let's do levels of measurement first. Okay? All right, so let me put this over here real quick. All right, so levels of measurement. Now, I'm going to put them in order from least specific to most specific. Okay? The first level of measurement is called nominal. So it's the least specific. And it is category only. Category only. So there's no order. Category only, no order. So an example of that might be like hair color. You know, maybe you're blonde, maybe you're brunette, maybe you've got red hair, maybe you've got blonde, you see what I'm saying? There's no order to that. It's not that blondes are better or worse or higher or lower than black hair people. So nominal data means no order. If I tell you something's nominally helpful, is it very helpful or not very much? It is nominally what? Not very much. And that's what nominal data is. You set a category, but there's no order or hierarchy to that category. Now that's the least specific. Let me tell you what's a little more specific than nominal is ordinal. All right, ordinal. Now look at the word. Do you think it has order when it says ordinal? Yeah. So it has order. Okay. But here's the kicker. The differences are unknown or meaningless. Okay. The differences are unknown or meaningless. Now, let me give you an example, maybe that'll clear that up a little bit. You know how sometimes you'll go and be looking at, I don't know, Rotten Tomatoes or some site where you're trying to figure out if a movie's very good or not, and they'll like use stars. Or if you're looking at Amazon to get the ratings for the stars. All right, so I'm going to put like my example, I'll put star movie ratings. Okay, star movie ratings. Now, if you read your movie and it gets a 5-star review, or you read your movie and it gets a 4-star review, which one's better? You know that a 5-star is better than a what? Than a 4-star. So so the data's been put in categories: 1-star movie, 2-star movie, 3-star movie, 4-star movie, 5-star. Movie with me? All right. What makes a movie a 5-star versus a 4-star? All you know is that somebody thought it was what? Better. How much better? Is every 5-star movie the same amount of better to every 4-star movie? Are all 4-star movies the same? You see what I'm saying? Like, I don't know how it got to be a 5-star versus a 4-star. I don't know. All 4-star movies and 5-star movies are 1 star apart, right? But that doesn't mean they're the same amount of better with that one. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's meaningless. Like, I know the order, but I don't know anything about it. If I've got people running a race, you can come in first, second, and what? Third. But is the difference between 1 and 2 the same as between, they're both different by 1 and 2 differ by 1, second and third place differ by 1, right? Does that the same necessarily though? Are these 2 runners separated by the same as those 2? Not just what? You see what I'm saying? So that's what ordinal is. Now your third one and the fourth one are the ones that people get confused. Okay? All right. Number 3, all right, is called, let's see what I've got. Nominal, ordinal, interval. And I'm going to go ahead and write down number 4. It's called ratio. All right, interval and ratio. Now, both of them have order. Okay? Interval has order and ratio has order. So that's like ordinal. So which is the only one that doesn't have order? No. Okay. Here's what's different about these 2 from ordinal. The differences are known and meaningful. All right. The differences are known and meaningful. Both of them. All right, now, that's what what makes these different than this. Let me tell you what makes these two different from each other. Now, this is the best way I know to phrase it. It's a little weird. It's not exactly, somebody might argue with me like if they were really particular, but I think this is going to be helpful. Here's the difference. On interval data, the measuring scale doesn't have, and I'm going to put in quotation marks, absolute zero. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. On the ratio, the measuring scale does have an absolute zero. And I'll give you an example and hopefully that'll clear it up. Now your book calls it a natural zero. I think absolute makes a little more sense. That's why I've changed the wording. All right, now. All right, you got it written down? All right, here's my example of interval. Temperature. We'll put in like Fahrenheit, like degrees Fahrenheit. So that would be like, what if today I went in to 10 cities in the United States and got the temperature at the same time? Like it knew what was the temperature in here, LA, Orlando, New York City, St. Louis, you see what I'm saying? I got 10 temperatures. Could you put those temperatures in an order? Okay, with me? You can either go high to low or what? Low to high. So it's at least ordinal, right? Now, let's see if it's one of these. So you got the data in order from high to low, right? Are the differences known and meaningful? Like if I've got somebody with a temperature of 90 and 94, and somebody else has a temperature of 80 and 84. These differ by 4 and these differ by 4, right? Does 4 degrees here mean the same thing as 4 degrees up here? Yeah. So the differences are known and they're what? Meaningful. So I'm at least here. Now, why is it not ratio? Well, look what this says. This measuring scale. Think about what you measure temperature with. Is there a 0 on that scale? But it's not a what? Absolute 0. Here's what I mean by that. Can you go below it? Can the temperature somewhere be like a negative 14 degrees? Yeah, I don't know why anybody want to live there, but you can. Do you see what I'm saying? So I didn't say it didn't have a 0. I said it didn't have a what? Absolute 0. There's a 0, but if you can go past it, that's not an absolute 0. That's why 80 degrees is not twice as hot as 40 degrees. That's not a true statement. Because 0 doesn't mean the absence of all heat. Everybody with me? When it's negative 5 degrees outside, there's still heat. It's just low. Everybody with me? So you can't do ratios. That's what I mean about ratios. You can't do ratios if you can go below 0. Now let me give you an example of ratio data. All right. Weight. So weight. If I made everybody in the room step on a scale and I copied down your weight. All right, so now I've got this list of 18 numbers. Can I put that list in an order that makes sense? I could either again go low to high or what? High to low. So now my data is at least what? Ordinal. All right, think about what you measure weight with. Does that measuring scale have a 0 on it? It does, right? And if 2 of you differ by 5 pounds and these 2 over here differ by 5 pounds, does 5 pounds over here mean the same thing as 5 pounds over here? Yeah, 5 pounds is the same wherever you find it. So it's at least interval. Now, why is it ratio? There's a 0 on that scale. Can you go below 0? Can something weigh a negative number? What? That's why it's ratio. So 200 pounds is twice as heavy as 100 pounds. So both of these have a 0 on the scale, but this one you can't go past 0. Like if I were to measure the length of this table, if I had 14 different size tables and I measured the length of every table, do those measurements, do those table lengths have an order? What? Yeah, so it's at least ordinal. Can I put those numbers, when I put them in order, do I understand the difference of an inch here versus an inch here? Does an inch mean the same thing no matter where it is? So I'm at least up to what? Interval. All right, think about what you measure length with. Does that measuring device have a 0 on it? Can you go past 0 to measure something? Can you have a negative length? What? No, that's why it's what? Ratio. So do these kind of make sense to y'all? Are those all right? Okay. Then let's talk about, that kind of mostly finishes that section 1, 2. Right, I'm flipping to see if there's anything else in there that I want to talk about real quick before I go to that next section. Flip back. We talked about loaded questions. We talked about order questions. We talked about exact numbers. We talked about if it's something voluntary, it's a problem if you get a voluntary response because it skews your data. All right, one other thing before we go to this next section 1-3, we're going to talk about types of sampling. Do understand that anonymity is a big deal too. Okay, and by that I mean if you're doing something that I call what a sensitive question, people really need to be guaranteed anonymity because they act differently. Like if my cell phone rings and somebody says, we're taking a survey, how many times would you be willing to fill it out? You know, and I'm like, I always feel sorry for people. I'm like, sure. So they say, how many times a week, how many times a month do you visit the casino? Never. Now that is true. When I get through with it, you don't want to go either, but we'll do probability. But that could be like Dr. Thompson. And I work at a Baptist school. You see what I'm saying? Because if you know my phone number, you can probably find out my name. Everybody with me? So when it's sensitive information, people don't tend to tell you the truth. If I'm sitting in my Southern Baptist Sunday school class and somebody asks me my opinion about abortion, I know the right answer. Whether that's my real opinion or not. Is everybody with me? Now, it might be my real opinion, but if it wasn't, I know I'm not going to answer truthfully. So if people feel like they can be identified, there's not being an issue with that. Now, we're going to talk about a lot of that when we end up talking about like studies for like drugs. You know, when you're doing a study, we're going to talk about sampling in a second, I've got to be real careful when I'm doing a drug study. Because they're going to talk about studies being blind, double blind, those kind of things. What does it mean when you're blind? You can't what? You can't see. So when you're testing a new drug, a lot of times you have what's called a placebo. What's a placebo? Is it real? So in other words, if I'm testing a drug that comes in a pill form, I'm going to give pills to both groups. But one pill's the real drug and one pill what? Just shoots nothing. Because, and here's what it means by blind. Blind means you don't know which pill you're taking. So I'm in the group, I'm in the study, but I don't know if they're giving me the real medicine or a fake medicine. That's what it means by blind. And the reason is, a lot of times, your brain's a powerful instrument. So a lot of times, just because you're taking a pill, you think you're supposed to get better, so you know what you do? You get better. Now, a double-blind study means not only does the patient not know, it means the doctor doesn't know. So that's what I mean by double blind. It means the person getting the treatment means when they don't know, that's blind. When the giver of the treatment and the getter don't know, that's double blind. And the reason a lot of studies are double blind is they were finding out that physicians weren't meaning to. But they would do things like they would spend a little more time with the people that were taking the real drug. You see what I'm saying? Things they were expecting to look for different things. So this idea of this blind and double blind is something really important. Okay, now let's talk about ways of sample. All right, so types of sample. Types of sample. Now, we talked about last time that there are different ways to sample. And I told you that one of my things when I'm reading a study, like this summer when I was reading studies, one of the first things I would look at is, who's in your sample, how'd you get it? Because if I judge that it's not valid, I'm not going to keep reading. Because remember what we said, if your sample is not a good representation of your population, then you can't generalize to that population. Like upstairs yesterday, I was running numbers and some things with another math professor about COVID sampling. Is everybody with me? About if MC decides to start doing some sampling testing, how many do we need to sample? How do we need to pick the sample? You know what I'm saying? Because you don't want to do it if it's not going to generalize up to the population. Because what you're really trying to find out is how many people in MC are infected. You're really not trying to find out how many in my 50 are infected. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, that's good to know, but really you want to be able to generalize it up. If about 5 of 50 are affected down here, what do I think is the infection rate up here? So this is a huge deal. If it's not done correctly, it's a waste of money and your time and my time and everybody's time doing it. So I need somebody that knows what they're doing when they're sampling. So when you start doing this for your disciplines, I need you to understand, in every discipline in here, somebody's doing research. They're doing research in education, they're doing research in medicine, they're doing research in business, they're doing, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're in kinesiology, they're doing research, and nursing, somebody's doing research, and you need to know what's happening in your discipline. Because your best practices are based on research and on science. So they want you to be, and you're probably going to either be participating or making up studies in the course of your life. So again, we want those to be good and valid. Otherwise, it's a waste of resources and time. So like we talked about, if the majority of my population is female and the majority of my sample is male, do you see my problem? I can't generalize anymore. So let's talk about types of sampling. All right, here's the first type I'm going to talk about, random. Random. Now, this is one of those times when vocabulary words are problematic. When you're outside of a math class, you say, well, that was random. Does that mean it was thoughtful or kind of not thoughtful? Planned or unplanned? When something's random, what do you think of? Yeah, kind of haphazard, you know what I'm saying? That is not remotely what it means in statistics. Random sampling means that every item in the population must have the same chance of being selected. Not just a chance, the exact same chance. And that's really hard and great. So random sample sounds bad, like haphazard if you're not a mathematician. If you're a mathematician, you're like, that's what I'm talking about. It's a great sampling technique and extremely hard. Because for me to say it's a real random sample, I mean, everybody's got to have the same chance of getting what? getting picked. Now, let me give you like an example about why that's harder than it sounds. What if I want to predict who's going to win president in November? Now, I've told everybody this, and I'm telling you, you need to be registered to vote. If you're not, like, do it today. Okay. I'm going to see Jesus way before you do, so it's really not going to affect me as much as it's going to affect you. Okay. So it's going to affect your life from now on. So you need to go get registered to vote. All right. So into that mini sermon. Now, back to Matthew. All right. Let me take it down a little bit to make it more manageable. Suppose I want to predict who's going to be the mayor of Clinton. Okay. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but a list of registered voters is public record, which means I can go get a list of all the registered voters. I could find out if you're registered. Now, here's the deal. What if I just said, okay, there are 30,000 names. I'm going to pick name number 20,145. I'm going to pick name number 2. I'm going to pick name number 553. You see what I'm saying? What if I just, in my mind, randomly pick like 1,000 numbers? And then go talk to those people and ask them who they're going to vote for. Now, that sounds like a random sample. Is everybody with me? But it's not. Why? I mean, doesn't everybody have the same chance of getting picked? Well, the answer is no. And here's one of the reasons why. Now, if you were to just catch me off guard and say, give me a number, or give me a number between 1 and 100, you see what I'm saying? I do not know why, but I will almost always give you a number with 4 in it. I love 4, apparently. Apparently it's my favorite number. I do not know. See, I have biases. No self-respecting Southern Baptist is going to pick 666. You'll burn. You know what I'm saying? Like, what number floor? There's a floor that a lot of hotels don't have this number floor. What number is it?
13.
13. People don't want to stay on the floor. It's usually the last row in the airplane. You see what I'm saying? Like, people have biases for and against numbers that you don't even know. So that's gonna come into play if I'm just guessing or picking, even with my mind, I'm being random, but I'm not. What if I just arbitrarily what if I get a list of all the people that are registered voters with cell phones and randomly just call numbers from the list? You see what I'm saying? What's wrong if I just call cell phones? Why does everybody not have the same chance of getting picked? What if they don't have a cell phone? Some senior adults, what? They don't have a cell phone. So what chance do they have of me contacting them? What? Maybe a registered voter's under a bridge. You see what I'm saying? So it's really hard to do, but it's really a great way of sampling if you can do it. What you're really going to have to do is get basically what you think of as a computer involved. So what I can do is feed that information into a computer program and tell the computer I need 1,000 numbers because the computer doesn't have a bias. And it will spit me out and I go find person number. You with me? But you almost have to have a non-human helping you with this. All right, now let me tell you a different kind of sampling. All right. Let's see which one they kind of put next. Let's do systematic. All right, systematic. I'm going to put nth item in the population is selected. All right, every nth item in the population is selected. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Now, it might be 10th, 217, everybody with me? Now, my husband, all right, when he graduated high school, he wasn't sure, he didn't like school much. So he was thinking maybe he didn't really want to go to college. Okay, so he got a summer job. Now, but he was from Vicksburg. Back then, there was a place there called Westinghouse. And Westinghouse was a plant that made lamps, was one of the things that they made. So what my husband did the summer after he graduated high school, he worked on an assembly line. And for 8 hours a day, he picked up a screw and screwed it in a lamp. And then, so they stood in the line. He said there were about 15 of them that stood in this line, and the lamps would come, one lamp would stop in front of one person. And you pick your screw up and screw it in a certain hole. Those lamps would go off, and then here came the next bit. You ready with me? So for 8 hours a day, he screwed a screw in a hole. Suddenly, college sounded better. That's probably why his daddy did it. Now, I'm not dissing people who work in factories. My mother worked in a factory all of her working life. But it's hard work. Is everybody with me? Now, suppose I'm quality control for Westinghouse. And I go by, and I want to make sure that, we're producing a good product. So I come by every now and then, and I check every 5th lamp that comes off that assembly line. Make sure that screws in good and tight. That would be systematic, because I'm checking every what? Every fifth item. Is that a good idea if I'm working for Westinghouse and I'm quality control? Is that a good way of doing it or a bad way? What do you think?
Bad,
Why?
because if the workers know that you're only checking every 5th lamp, they only have to try every 5th lamp.
And it may be that if they're not moving, what am I really doing every time? Am I checking only person number what? 5? You see the problem? They either know the other 4 times don't matter if I'm coming by every 5th interval. Is everybody with me? So now I got to pay attention. Or if I come by every time and I'm still checking the 5th lamp, I'm checking the same dude's work every time. Maybe he is so excited to put that screw in. He's the best putter in the, I'm saying, he's the best screw putter in the hole you've ever had. I'm saying? He loves his job. Maybe person number like 9, it's Monday, but they ain't got over Saturday yet. So in that instance, systematic isn't what? Isn't a good idea. But let's go back to my mayor. I get that list of names of all the registered voter, and I pick every 215th name. You with me? That's systematic. That would probably be fine as long as I didn't decide on 217. So if the computer said 175, I'm like, okay, every 175th name on the list, I'm going to contact and find out who they're voting for. So sometimes systematic is a good way of doing it, and sometimes systematic is what? Not a good way of doing it. Just like upstairs this morning, we were going over if we decide to do sampling, should we do stratified? Because see, I've got commuters and I've got resident students. Do you see what I'm saying? And so I do need to make sure if we decide to do that, I need some of what? Some of both, but that's going to be something called stratified in a minute. But with systematic, or should I put them all in a list and pick every, you see what I'm saying? Or should we go do random? So there's all different, we got to make it, if they decide to do it, they decide to sample, how should we sample? All right, so this one's good all the time. This one's good sometimes what? And not good sometimes. Everybody okay? All right, let's talk about cluster sampling. All right, cluster sampling. On cluster sampling, you select groups rather than individuals from the population. Okay, so you're selecting groups from the population. Okay. Now, think about a cluster of grapes. You're not picking one grape, you're picking one, a whole what? A whole bunch. Is everybody with me? Okay. So this would be more like, if I'm gonna, maybe instead of picking individuals or picking every 14th person, maybe I decide I need streets in Clinton. Because I'm gonna go in on foot talking to people one-on-one. So then I'm pulling out random street names and I'm interviewing everybody that's registered on that street. Is everybody with me? That's cluster. Now let me kind of talk about cluster versus stratified, and then kind of, these are the two that people get confused. When I keep going over here, y'all, what I'm doing is I'm flipping the board for the people on stage. So, okay. All right. 4 is stratified. Now, with stratified, the population is divided into groups, and sum of each group is selected. Okay, I'm writing something down so they can see it on Zoom, and then I'll explain it to you in a second. All right, if you have geography, you've heard of strata, right? So strata is like layers of the earth. So I'm going to explain the difference. These are the two that people get confused, because cluster says something about groups, right? And now stratified says something about what? Groups. Here's the difference between cluster and stratified. All right? With cluster, this one over here, you pick all of some. On stratified, you pick some of all. Now, you write that down, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that with an example. Now, stratified happens a lot, like if we decide to do testing, I might divide the M6 population into faculty, staff, commuters, and residents. And I'm going to pick some faculty and some staff and some commuters and some residents. Everybody with me? So sum of all the groups. See, down here a minute ago, I was picking all of some groups. So let me tell you, what if I wanted to know this question? I wonder if the time you take a class matters. Like, do people do better or worse at 8 o'clock classes? You know, is it that they do better because people take 8 o'clock so real, go-getters, or is it like they're really sleepy and they should be in the bed? You see what I'm saying? Like, good idea, bad idea. So I decided I want to do a study about the average grades in the 8 o'clock class. So I go get a list of every 8 o'clock class from the registrar's office. Cluster would be if I took all of some of the classes. Like if I went and took all of Ivan Park's New Testament class, and then I took all of Susan Lassiter's Lit class, then I took all of Dr. LaBelle's Tree class, and I didn't take anybody out of Dr. D'Amico's class. I didn't take anybody out of Dr. Buckaloo's class. I didn't take anybody out of, well, David Megan's never taken that class, but you see what I'm saying? So some whole classes are picked and some whole classes are what? Not picked. That's what cluster is. All of some. Now, here's what stratified would be. Stratified would be, I've got that list of 8 o'clock classes and I picked 10 students out of each class. So some of all the classes are what? So if you're picking whole groups, so all of a group gets picked and all of a group gets missed, that's cluster. If in every group, some people are picked and in every group, some people are not picked, that is what? Stratified. Okay? They do stratified a lot in political polls. Because, for instance, in the presidential election that's coming up, they wonder if gender matters. Because you got one of the candidates is female. So they might divide the voters up into males and females and they pick some males and what? Some females. That's stratified. It might be, there are lots of ways to kind of divvy it up. It might be based on, they might do it based on race. They can do it by races. It might do it based on religious preferences. Do you see what I'm saying? If they're trying to figure out, I remember, from what I've read, back when John F. Kennedy ran, he was the first Catholic that had ever run for president. And there was the thought put out there that, that the Pope would be in charge. Because a good Catholic does what the Pope says. So a lot of polls had divided the U.S. up based on religious preferences to see if the fact he was Catholic was going to be an issue. Were the Catholics all voting for him and the Baptists thinking he's safe? You see what I'm saying? What's up with this? So back when Hillary Clinton was running, it was a big deal about male versus female. Okay, when Obama was running, race was a big deal because he was the first time that you had a person of color running for president. So that's why stratified a lot of times, they take this a characteristic they think is going to be a big deal. So they'll divide the population up by that characteristic and then pick some of each to make sure that every group is represented. So do you understand the difference between cluster and stratified? Does that make sense? Now, let me put one more, and it's what it says, convenience. Okay, convenience. Now, when something's convenient, what's that mean? It's what? What's it mean to be convenient? Easy. And you might put in parentheses and worthless. I don't think I've ever seen a convenient study that was any good. It's easy. And you would think nobody would ever use it, but y'all, it is a sad, sad thing. See, this would be a convenient study. I just go to the cafeteria and talk to everybody. I get on Facebook and look at my feed. Now, you do understand that when you get on a social media, have you ever heard the term echo chamber? All right, let me tell you what an echo chamber is. What happens when you're in like a whole, what does it mean when something echoes? When you say something, what happens? Your voice comes what? Right back to you. The algorithms for social media do echoes. So what that means is every time you click on something, it's fed in. They're learning your preferences. So if you keep clicking on things about gun control and you click on it, then you're going to get more things about what? Gun control. If I keep clicking on things that are, let's go with the word liberal in air quotes, they're going to keep feeding me things back that are what? Liberal. Well, if I don't know that, it looks like everybody agrees with me. Do you see what I'm saying? When in fact, what? They do not. So this is what happens, for instance. My daughter and I can compare our social feeds, you with me? About the same person. Like, let's take the most polarizing person in the world, like Donald Trump. Somebody with me? If you go to my daughter's news feed about Donald Trump and you read the articles that come up, versus you go to my uncle and read all of the feeds that come about Donald Trump on his social media, these look like two completely different human beings. Because everything that's fed to my uncle is that Donald Trump's being villainized. It's not, you see what I'm saying? It's not his fault. Nobody lets him do what he needs to do. It's a whole conspiracy, you see what I'm saying? And everything he reads, I guarantee you, solidifies that vote, solidifies that. My daughter, I guarantee you, he's Satan. You see what I'm saying? Like everything coming up on her feed, he's crazy, he did this, the Russian, you see what I'm saying? Because it's horrible. So what I'm telling you is, to be a good citizen, you've got to get out of your echo chambers. You've got to. I've got to. We need to be able to find somebody else that does not agree with us and have a civil conversation with them. And say, explain, why do you like Donald Trump? I mean, you're a quality person. I mean, my uncle's a great dude. You see what I'm saying? Like, tell me why you like him. Look at my daughter and go, why do you hate him? Again, you're a quality person. Like, tell me your thoughts. Because there are no black and white answers. And just because somebody doesn't agree with me doesn't necessarily mean that they're right and I'm wrong, or I'm right and what? They're wrong. And even if somebody's right or wrong, in my opinion, it doesn't make them evil. So we've got to quit assigning motives to people. You see what I'm saying? Like, you can vote for somebody different from me, but that doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you don't love children. It doesn't mean that you hate people of color. It doesn't, you see what I'm saying? Like, we've got to figure this out. So, that's my plea for you, is to get out of your echo chamber. Go find somebody that disagrees with you and have a civil conversation. You may not change your view. Now, the person on the planet that's the best at this is my daughter. She's way better than me. Like, she has real strong opinions about things, but she really does go talk to people that she knows don't agree with her. And she listens for understanding, not for rebuttal. There's a difference. Sometimes when you talk to somebody that's different, you're trying to figure out where their thinking's wrong, so you can, rather than really trying to understand. Like, my daughter, for instance, teaches in inner city New Orleans. So equity is huge for her. You understand? Like, that's one of her main things. So like when that Confederate flag, that was a big deal for her. Do you see what I'm saying? So, she's got people in New Orleans on her street corner that are like guarding a monument. So what does my daughter do? She goes up and just starts talking to them about why is this important enough for you to stand here? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, this must matter to you. Like, tell me why it matters to you. And then when the conversation was over, neither one was mad at me. You know what I'm saying? Like, just explain to me your thought processes. And then here's a phrase that I've learned that has saved me a whole lot of stress. This isn't even math. I can charge all extra for this. Perhaps you're right. What that reminds me is that I'm not always what? Right. Now, the dumbest phrase I've ever heard to me is, you always think you're right. Well, yeah. I mean, if I didn't think I was right, I would think something else. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, of course I always think I'm right. Who wants to go, I know I'm wrong, so I'm going to keep, everybody always thinks they're right. But when I say the phrase out loud to somebody, perhaps you're right, it does remind me that I can't guarantee that I have absolute truth. And it also lets them know they've been heard. Is everybody with me? Perhaps you're right. But it also didn't say you're right, it said what? Just try not to say it snappily. That's what I do. Well, perhaps you're right. Now, where's your homework going to be? on Moodle. So do you understand that that document, I'm just gonna add to that document every time. Now, sometimes I may post a video if I take the class or something, it might be done under a week, but your homework's always gonna be a running thing. Now, I told them last time, let me reiterate. You can't ask questions on Zoom, that's just too weird, you know what I'm saying? So make sure that if you have questions though, make sure that you're asking me questions in class. If you're uncomfortable doing that or you want an answer before I see you physically again, email me. We can meet one-on-one through Zoom. We can meet up in the conference room if you think Zoom's gonna freak you out, but don't sit there and watch. Is everybody with me? And you're gonna have a pop test next week probably soon, so make sure that you start studying. All right.